I couldn't work out what the hell was going on. I just get hit with this wave of nausea and just vomit. Couldn't even hold it. It was just so instantaneous. Then everything was spinning. The world was just spinning around. I thought, crikey, I'm being poisoned.
Matt Dearden wasn't on the ground when all of this was happening. He was in a small aircraft, thousands of feet in the sky.
I'm by myself, just with a bunch of fuel drums in the back. And this is in an aircraft that doesn't have an autopilot.
If he passes out and lets go of the controls, there's nothing to save him.
And then I thought, how the hell am I going to land this thing? I couldn't even talk. I was just so weak. I was literally, I could feel the blinks just getting longer and longer between each one. All my powers were just trying to keep the aircraft flying. Every blink I just thought, that'll be the last one. And the aircraft's just going to disappear into the jungle.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey folks, welcome back to No Ordinary Monday. Hope your week's off to a good start, wherever you're tuning in from. I'm Chris Barron, I'm a documentary filmmaker, and each week I invite a guest onto the show to tell me about the most extraordinary experience that they've ever had on the job. We start with the path that led them there, we find out what the job's really like behind the scenes, and then we reveal the most important lessons they've learned along the way. No major announcements this week, but as always, if there is a job or profession that you'd love me to cover on the show, drop me an email, hello, HELLO, at noordinarymonday.com. And of course, click to follow the show if you haven't done so already. Alright, so on to today's episode. My guest today is Matt Dearden. Matt is a bush pilot, someone who flies small aircraft into some of the most remote, mountainous, and unforgiving terrain on planet Earth. After leaving a comfortable job in IT, Matt moved halfway around the world to Indonesia, where he flew solo missions across the most remote parts of Papua, landing on dirt airstrips that were literally carved into jungle mountainsides, often with no backup, no second pilot, and no margin for error. Matt provided a whole bunch of amazing videos and photos of his adventure for this episode, so please check out the YouTube version to get the full experience. In this episode, Matt takes us inside one flight in particular, when something went very wrong in midair. Flying alone, with no autopilot, over a dense jungle, and he was slowly losing control of his body. Stick around to find out what it's really like to be a bush pilot in the wilds of Indonesia. You're listening to No Ordinary Monday. Let's get into the show. Matt, how you doing? Welcome to the podcast. How you doing, man?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolute pleasure. I am super excited to sort of have you on because you have, I think, some amazing stories from your job. And I guess the first question is kind of a big, broad one, but have you ever counted how many near-death or sort of close calls you've had across your career?
Yeah, not really. I guess if I did, then yeah, I might not keep doing it, sort of thing. So there's probably at least a couple that really stand out. But yeah, where genuinely thought this might be it. But yeah, there's probably definitely been some close ones that I don't know. As you kind of gain experience, probably don't feel as close as they might have actually been. You know what I mean? It's you sort of just get conditioned to stuff, I suppose, sometimes. So what's to the outside might be like, oh my God, it might just be, a Monday morning for me.
Yeah. Honestly, it's a crazy career that you've had, and a lot more exciting than a lot of other people might anticipate. But I think where I want to start is not with the bush pilot sort of stuff, but I want to start where it was not your first career. You started in a completely different career and almost polar opposite to what you ended up in. And I wondered, just talk us through sort of what that career was and sort of what led you to sort of leave it eventually.
Yeah, so where do I begin? I guess as a teenager, I suppose, kind of in my early teens, and this would have been the 1990s. I was really into computers. It was just something I loved doing. Dad was quite into tech, I guess, at that point. So we always had a kind of home computer, from the BBC Micros. I learned to program in BASIC, which was the kind of computer language that these things use. And I loved it. At least I used to write little video games, and I just had this real passion for it. I actually didn't play that many games. I did like computer games as well, but I just like coding. It's just something that I was really into. And then obviously I went to school. I guess I should start. I grew up in the Middle East. So I grew up in like Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, and then Bahrain in the 90s. So I went to boarding school back in England. Um, and that affords you quite a lot of opportunities. It's quite a privileged upbringing, really.
Mm.
And so, they had a big computer place, a big computer department, I guess. And so I continued that kind of passion and got an A level in computer science, and then went on to university and did a computer science degree. And I loved it, and I carried on with this kind of, thing and ended up getting a job programming computers in Bristol, which, dream job, 21, pretty
Yeah.
sweet. Everything's going really well. And yeah, as I guess for most people, you start a new job, it's exciting, it's interesting, you're kind of stimulated, and I loved it for quite a few years. But then I guess with most things, and this I think is common for a lot of people, but especially myself, I find I once I feel I've kind of done something, I'm done with it, and then I kind of want to do
Really.
something else. Um, but I guess at that point, life kind of took a bit of a turn, I suppose, because I kind of achieved everything I wanted to do. I bought a flat in Bristol, so I'm like 24, 25, and everything that I could have wanted to achieve in life had been done. I had a nice job doing Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, programming computers, my dream job, my own apartment, everything looking great. But I had this building anxiety in the background all the time. It would just get worse and worse, and I'd wake up, really early in the morning, just with this churning kind of stomach, and just not really focusing on anything. There was no like rhyme or reason for why I was worried. Everything was,
Mm.
sweet. If you looked at my life from the outside, you're like, no, this guy's got a perfect life.
Yeah.
I went on, had a big group of friends, went on holidays, skiing and mountain biking and this kind of stuff. So, it was all pretty much perfect. So it didn't make any sense. Um, but then I guess this is the point where I actually decided, you know what? I remember at school, and as I said, I went to sporting school, so we had some nice opportunities, and part of it was this like cadet force. And I took a couple of flights in an RAF Bulldog, which is a little two-seater training aircraft, which is aerobatic. I
Mm.
was thinking I was like 15 at the time, and I loved it. I was like, this is flipping cool. Like, this is really cool. But I was still
Did you
into
throw up?
computers. No, I was actually all right.
I think
Yeah, we just
I would
sort
be
of
the first one to throw up in that kind of situation,
yeah, I mean,
100%.
I guess like some kids did, but I was fine with it, and
There you go.
I kind of thought this is cool, but I wear contact lenses, and I kind of thought, I can't join the RAF. They want perfect eyesight, and also I went to boarding school. The last thing I wanted to do was to be regimented into a military
Mm.
regime, and I wanted to go out partying. So I went to university and did that basically,
Yeah.
and then continued on that. So the whole flying thing just sort of sat in the back of my mind, I guess. Um, but as I say, once I was in IT after a few years, it pays okay, and I thought, you know what, let's just try something new. Let's try this flying thing. I remember like I enjoyed it as a kid. It was kind of cool. Just around the corner from my office is Filton Airport. Fortunately, it's now closed these days, but back then it was still a functioning airport. And so I took a flying lesson. I thought, let's see. And straight away, I was like, yeah, this is damn cool. This was cool when
This
I was
was
a kid, and
good.
it's really cool now. And I took that trial lesson, and I kind of thought about it. And I thought, yeah, I'll go for the private pilot license. Why not? I've got enough money for this. So I carried on with it. And about two lessons in, I kind of thought, what's the deal with like, being like an airline pilot? Like, what if I wanted to, pursue this whole thing through? So I chatted with the instructors, and they kind of described how it worked basically. And it's a lot of work. There's kind of two ways. You can either quit your job, spend an awful lot of money, and basically go back to university to do all of the studies. You do it all in one. You go to classrooms, you do the studies, and then you do the flight training. And in about a year and a half, something like that, you get what's called a frozen ATPL, airline transport pilot license.
Hmm.
That then allows you to apply for an airline like EasyJet, Ryanair, BA, whatever. But I couldn't afford to do that. I didn't have enough money. And equally, I'd have to have quit my job, so it wouldn't have worked out. But there's another way, which is called like a modular way. So you can kind of take bits from each of the different sections you need to do and do them whilst keeping your current day job. So that's what I went
Nice.
for. So these studies, these airline transport pilot license studies, there's 14 exams you got to sit, and it's the best part of like half a degree, basically. They say because it's it's an awful lot of subjects. There's everything from air law to procedure systems to tech, aircraft tech. Um, you know,
Meteorology, I'm sure, as well.
actually
Things like that.
meteorology,
Yeah.
exactly, principles of flight, all this kind of stuff. It's a huge amount of information. It's a lot to take in, but you can do it distance learning. So they send you the books and then you sit there in your spare time and you study, basically. So that's what I did for like a year,
Oh, wow.
as anybody else has done this kind of stuff. And this kind of like focused my anxiety, I suppose, because it kind of gave me this distraction. And I guess this is what I'm going to do. So it kind of knocked it on head for a bit. I'd had a little bit of therapy. I went to see my GP before all this, and had some CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which it helped mitigate it, and some meditation and stuff. But it never really went away. It was always kind of bubbling away. But
So it was basically like a quarter life crisis. A lot of people talk like a midlife crisis where they kind of
yeah, I
achieved
guess
everything,
so.
but you did it by 24, 25 when you're like,
Yeah,
what have I got
yeah,
to
I
look
guess
forward
so.
to? And I guess that was kind of the root cause, was it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could call it a midlife crisis in a way. But yeah, as you say, quarter life, like a bit earlier on. Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. No, actually, I kind of do know what it was. I'll come back to that. Um, but yeah, so I kind of did this, and I found this like the hour or so that I was up there for doing my flying lessons as well was a massive distraction from the anxiety because, when you're flying an aircraft, and especially when you're learning to fly an aircraft, it's all encompassing. Your mind's not going to think about
Yeah.
anything else. All you're doing is thinking about, how do I keep this thing straight and level in a turn or whatever it is you're trying to do. And so the anxiety was gone completely at that point, but it would kind of come back in the background when I come back on the ground. And the ATPLs, these studies that I was doing, again, big distraction from that. So it just gave my mind this kind of focus. Anyway, I finished these exams after about a year. So as I say, I kept my day job. And this was a year of like, come home from work, study, 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 have some dinner, study a bit more, go to bed, go to work,
Wow.
study and
Yeah,
lunch
full
hour.
on.
Exactly. For like a year, basically. Weekends was just studying. All my holidays for that year at work, I had to go down to Gatwick and go sit the exams because
Yeah.
that takes, and you also need to do a bit of classroom too. So my 4 weeks off were basically two parts
Work.
of more exams. Um, so looking back, it was probably a stupid thing to do because once it was all finished, the anxiety just completely dominated me. It was
Oh,
just all
wow.
encompassing. I ended up moving back with my mom and dad because I just couldn't cope with being on my own. And it was just, yeah, it was really
Wow.
bad.
Is that bad?
So went to the GP, they were like trying to prescribe me with stuff. And I said, look, I want to fly airplanes. I don't really want you to give me a bunch of pills because I feel that's going to be a problem. But obviously at this point, I just kind of started on this journey. And so I had to inform the CAA, Civil Aviation Authority in the UK, that, I've been having all these kind of mental health problems. And of course, at that point, they're fully medical. Um, and you kind of think that someone who suffers from anxiety, having that happen would be devastating. But it was weirdly the opposite. It was sort of like this weight being lifted off my shoulders that I wasn't kind of hiding from this whole situation now. I wasn't like trying to ignore it. I'd
Wow.
even told the regulator, everyone knew basically that I had these
Yeah.
problems. I guess that was sort of the start of getting better, really. And I went to go see their psychiatrist, the Aviation Authority psychiatrist, and we talked about everything. And he said, look, I can see you perfectly safe to fly an aircraft. I don't see you're going to be a harm to yourself or anybody else. You're just going through a bit of a
Yeah.
rough patch. And so that, thankfully they reinstated my medical and I carried on with the flight training.
Amazing.
Um, and this was now coming. So I finished in 2000 and early 2009, and so this whole period was like 2006 to 2009, basically. And 2008, 2009, the biggest recession the world's seen, basically, or
Yeah.
at least in our lifetime.
When I graduated university, yeah, that was a tough time.
Yeah, and so anybody who was trying to get a job at that time, whatever it was not in a good way. And me with 200 hours experience trying to find a job in an airline, forget it. And it's just most numerous airlines were going bust basically. So me knocking on the door, going, "Hello, do you want to want to give me a job? No
Yeah.
chance. So I thought, wow, this was an expensive waste of money, getting a pilot license, which I'm not going to be able to use. Thankfully, I still had my IT job, so I wasn't like in a on the streets kind of thing. So I was
Yeah.
definitely a lot fortunate, more fortunate than most people. Um, but I was still kind of determined, so I just started flying everywhere. If I got a sniff of an airline or an aeroplane that maybe needed a pilot, I would go and apply. Had to keep a
Hmm.
big spreadsheet of everybody to make sure I didn't double up on things. And I found out about this company called Susi Air, based in a country called Indonesia, which I kind of heard of of the country, but hadn't heard of Susi Air. I
Hmm.
didn't really know where Indonesia was. I knew it was over in Asia somewhere. Had to go look that up on a map. I was like, oh, okay, it's quite a long way away.
Yeah.
And I applied to them, and as per usual, heard nothing back for many months. And then suddenly get an email sort of saying, oh yeah, we'd like to invite you for an interview
Hmm.
to Munich. I thought, okay, cool, Munich, weird, but okay. And generally, I thought it went pretty well. I got on really good with the guy there, and I thought, well, maybe I'm in with a shot here. And then heard nothing for weeks. And then eventually get an email saying, yeah, sorry, you didn't quite make the cuts. We'll put you in the holding pool kind of
Oh
thing.
man.
And I was like, okay. That things are due to the results of your test, basically. Yeah, we'll put you in the holding. I thought, oh, well, that's the end of that one. And then this would have been middle of October 2009. I get an email saying, congratulations, we'd like to offer you a job at Susi Air. Yeah, this is like the 20th of October, I think it was. Could you start 1st of November? So
Like
I
10
had
days
10
later
days
or something.
notice. Yeah, 10 days
Jeez.
notice. So this was on a Sunday, I remember. So I went
Yeah.
into the office on Monday morning and said to my boss, hey, I've been kind of looking for a flying job. And he's like, oh, yeah, how's that going? I was like, oh, I've actually got a job. And he's like, oh, amazing. Like, what is it? When are you going to start? I was like, well, I'm going to Asia and I kind of start next week. So, 8 years of IT, he was pretty good to me. And he's like, okay, well, I can't stop you.
Yeah.
Just tidy up what you can and best of luck with it. So
Oh wow, that's
that was a
really
blur of a week, I
understanding. Yeah.
remember. Sort of trying to pack everything up and rent the flat out and yeah, basically moving my life into a 20 kg suitcase. And
God. Move out to a
then
country you'd never
yeah,
heard of barely and never not
barely
know
heard of, and yeah,
barely. Yeah.
and
Wow.
and that's kind of
What
where
did
the
your
adventure
parents think at the
begins.
time? Were they happy? Were they like,
I mean, obviously happy, but also my mum terrified. He was quite tearful at the at Heathrow, I remember. I mean,
yeah,
crikey, with boarding school, I've been going in and out of Heathrow all my life, basically. And, these sort of tearful goodbyes were kind of quite normal, but I guess
yeah,
it was normally me going back to school and then the other way around. So now it was me disappearing. So yeah, it was emotional, but, the anxiety was obviously all over the shop at this point, but I kind of
yeah,
rationalized that who wouldn't be.
yeah.
It's a pretty interesting, terrifying prospect, I guess.
Amazing. So you ended up in Indonesia, and this is not commercial flying. You are flying smaller aircraft. I mean, it's still commercial flying in a sense. You're
Yeah,
obviously,
I'm getting
but
paid to
they're not.
fly.
You're being paid to fly, but you're not flying the big airliners. You're not flying two or three
No.
hundred people in an aircraft. You are flying. I mean, what kind of airline or what kind of aircraft did Susi Air generally operate?
So at that point, Susi Air had a fleet of Cessna Caravans. These are sort of 12-seat single propeller aircraft, which, if someone like myself who'd only been flying really small planes, this was actually quite a big aeroplane. And they also flew these things called Pilatus Porters, which I kind of wasn't interested in or knew anything about. I had this kind of plan in my mind that I'd go out there. I was offered jobs as a co-pilot, obviously. So I went out there, be a co-pilot, get some experience, maybe get captain, get a bit more, and then come back to UK and work for EasyJet, BA, whoever, because I'll have experience then. I'll have a couple of years commercial experience,
Yeah,
and hopefully, the job market might have improved by then, and just kind of have a bit of an adventure, really, at the same time. Um, but yeah, things kind of changed when I got out there, and I kind of, yeah, it's hard to describe, really. I suppose. Where do I begin that bit?
I mean, start. I mean, for me, I mean, just start by. I'd love to know. I mean, explain the difference of like what it might have been flying. EasyJet stuff, which I think everyone can imagine. It's everyone's been on a normal airline. I'm sure. Susi Air, being a pilot there, a co-pilot there, is a completely different level kettle of fish. Kind of just talk us through what that job entailed and sort of how that sort of first year unfolded and the crazy things that happened.
Yeah, okay. So the aircraft, as I say, these Cessna Caravans, which they're sort of 12 seats. We have two pilots up front, all open plan. So, anyone sitting in the back. I guess if you've been on like an African safari or something like that, it's that kind of plane, probably a little bit bigger than some of those ones. So non-pressurized, so we don't fly very high. Turbine engine, so it's not piston, so it's got a bit more safety behind it in that regard. Turbines generally are a lot safer. Big propeller on the front, and basically kind of hopping between different parts of Indonesia. Susie had these bases all over the place, over in Sumatra, in Borneo, in Java, through sort of Sulawesi, and then out in the province of Papua, or the New Guinea Island, as
Well, I guess
people
it's
around here
also
would
worth
call it.
mentioning that Indonesia is an archipelago of like 17,000 islands. And
That's
so
right.
it's kind of like these little air hoppers are the only way if you want to get off the island to another island, it's
That's
the only
it.
way off.
Yeah. And so Susie was basically a bit of a pioneering airline in that they would connect these sort of larger towns where, say, an EasyJet type aircraft could land. And then from those kind of towns, fly out to the really smaller kind of villages and things. And that's kind of what we were doing. We were flying these caravans between these kind of larger places and these smaller places on government subsidized routes. So there'd all be passengers, occasionally a bit of cargo here and there. And generally just sort of helping the infrastructure of the country, which the government of Indonesia sponsored. They called these parentis flights, which kind of roughly translates as pioneering. And eventually, sometimes some of these routes would develop into a much bigger route as the runways got longer, and then the population increased, and then larger aircraft would come. But Susie would just focus on that kind of initial pioneering side of it, which I just fell in love with it. That was it was just you know um, almost sort of I don't know if I'd love at first sight, but it was just sort of this whole kind of chaos of it all. Really, it just really struck a chord with me, and sort of changed how I viewed aviation, because I didn't realize this was even a way of making money in aviation. I kind of assumed that to do that you'd have to be an airline pilot, but
Yeah.
it turns out there's all ways of getting paid to fly aircraft. And for me, this was just the most awesome and interesting way. As a co-pilot of Susie, you'd kind of work for 2 months at one station and then it'd move you somewhere else. And so you'd always move every couple of months. And this was deliberate. This was to kind of get you used to get you to experience all the different parts of Indonesia and sort of decide whereabouts, as in the archipelago, you might want to settle down, because as a captain, you got to pick where you wanted. So you can kind of say, oh,
Oh,
I'd like to
cool.
be in Sumatra, I'd like to be in Borneo, I want to be in Java, in the big cities, whatever your kind of bag was, that's where you go. And for me, it was Papua. It was, when I got out there, that is a whole different. It's Indonesian, but it's not Indonesia.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing. And aside from just the island of Papua itself, and the kind of local tribes and the kind of, I don't know, pioneer feel to it all. You really feel like a frontier kind of a place. Had an edginess to it, and I loved it. And then doubled up with that, I kind of found this aircraft, the
Yep.
Pilatus Porter,
Yep.
and that really was love at first sight. And that's really what changed it all. Was fun, was just seeing those aircraft.
Yeah, I mean, just I guess talk us through the Pilatus and why it's such a good match for the absolute raw, remote craziness of Papua.
So the Pilatus Porter, or the Pilatus PC-6 Porter, to give it its full name, is it's a Swiss-built aircraft, and it was designed way back in the 50s, and sort of got popular in the sort of 60s and 70s when they started to put the turbine engines in them, which gave them good power. It was quite famous in, if you've ever seen the movie Air America,
Mm.
and it was featured in that. And that particular CIA airline used to use them to kind of do all sorts of interesting stuff, mostly landing on the side of mountains, which is exactly what Susi Air was doing with them. And when I saw this thing parked up, it's quite a large aircraft. I mean, it's still a single engine turbine thing, but compared to most single engine turbines, it's pretty sizable. You'll take nearly a ton of cargo on board. And the difference between that and the Caravan was that the Porter was just one pilot, so not two crew. So it was very much just get in, throw it in the back, and go flying and get the job done kind of thing. And that just really struck a chord with me. And I kind of hopped on a couple of the flights with some of the guys and just went to some of the airstrips because the Porter can land on pretty much anything you want to call an airstrip. And I was like, damn, this is just the most sick flying I've ever seen. And sod the airlines. I'm not even remotely interested now. I want to do this. And
It's
so I just
something in
made a
between
beeline.
like commercial piloting and stunt piloting, isn't it?
Well, it's what you call bush flying or mountain flying, and it's a whole different thing. It's you've still got kind of procedures and things, but it's much more seat of the pants. It's much more just, you know, kind of know what you can do, know what the aircraft can do, and basically do it as safe as you can. And I wanted to do that, and so I was only 6 months in as a caravan co-pilot at this point, but
I
yeah, my
guess
whole kind of target changed.
I'm trying to think of a comparison again, like with the sort of like the big airliner being like a big bus, like a city bus, and then or like a coach that would drive between cities. This is more like a quad bike or like a dune buggy that would be like a bit could go anywhere,
Yeah, I
do
mean, I
anything.
used to call it like a Land Rover Defender.
There you go.
It's pretty, it's bloody uncomfortable. It's really noisy. It's pretty bad on everything. But if you need to get something somewhere really remote and you need to just, put it down on some really rough terrain, it's the
Yeah,
machine for the job.
amazing.
Um, it's not comfortable, but it'll do it.
And you're dealing with, as I said, Papua is very remote, and the people are very different to a lot of other parts of Indonesia. And you might be seeing tribes of people that rarely see white people, let alone planes. Like, just talk us through some of the cultural interactions that you may have had in your experiences.
Yeah, so as I kind of say, Papua it is owned by Indonesia. It is the western half of the New Guinea island. So you've got Papua New Guinea on the east there, and then this western half is part of Indonesia, and the people there are still Papuans. They are much different. They're sort of much darker skinned. They're quite small mountain people, very hardy. These guys live much more simple lives. They don't live in fancy towns. Most of the
Mm,
places didn't have electricity. They'd just be small little huts perched on the side of mountains or sort of deep in the jungles, really. It kind of depends. We flew to all of them, basically. And there was a lot of Indonesian people kind of moving over there, but the majority of the population was the Papuans, who, as I say, they hadn't seen Western people. A lot of them hadn't seen them at all, but they were sort of first discovered, for want of a better word, by an exhibition in the 20s, which was the Archibald exhibitions. He flew a Catalina actually, and landed it on one of the lakes there, and then kind of started to interact with the locals. And from there, I guess the missionaries then started to come in, and then that's when all these little airstrips started to pop up, and it kind of ballooned from there, I suppose. So these guys, the Papuans, they when they were first sort of discovered, they had fire and kind of primitive tools and things, but they hadn't invented wheels at that point. And so this is only 100 years ago, and they've gone from that to now having air transport,
yeah,
riding motorbikes and driving cars, and just
iPhones or whatever.
a few iPhones. The phone signal is amazing in some parts of Papua. It's actually better than London. But yeah, so in terms of like a progression for a people, it's probably unprecedented, I imagine.
Incredible. And you're flying, Papuans from one place to another. They might be flying with everything from hunting rivals to, livestock to whatever in the back of the cab. It's not your usual sort of passengers.
No, I mean it was. We had this kind of mantra with the porters: if it fits, it flies. If you can get it in the back there, and it's not overweight, and you
Yeah.
can keep the balance correct, then we'll take it basically. So yeah, I had everything from live pigs, which are really noisy and make quite a mess, yeah, through to the kind of local peak guys with their weaponry and whatnot. And a lot of building supplies, we'd fly a lot of that around because obviously it
Yeah.
was a developing, and it still is a developing part of the world. So there's a lot of, yeah, as I say, building supplies and tools and that sort of thing, and as well as fuel drums. We used to fly these things around, which, yeah, they were
Yeah.
horrible, but
Oh, I
it
can
was a lot of
imagine.
machinery building roads and that sort of thing. So they needed the diesel.
Crazy. And I guess this, as you said before, with the this is a remote part of the world, difficult terrain, difficult weather, and when at what point did you, I guess, were confronted by the fact that this is a potentially very dangerous and potentially lethal job. There was a few
I
scenarios, I
guess
imagine,
like
right?
we were always aware of it. Everyone who flew out there knew that it was dangerous. But I guess what really brings it home is when you have someone killed in a plane crash. That's that's when it really hits home. And I do remember that the first accident Susi Air had. It was a couple of guys, one of whom I'd actually trained with, I joined the company with, and that kind of hits home, and you think, God, okay, I know he's a good guy, he's a good pilot, and it happened. You always had the sort of fatalistic approach that it would never be me.
Yeah,
I think you kind of had to have that because if you didn't, you wouldn't do it. If you had
yeah,
that kind of doubt that you couldn't do it, then you'd leave basically, you wouldn't do it. So yeah, that's kind of what brings it home to you is that sort of thing.
wow.
And unfortunately, during my time, Susie Air did have three fatal crashes, which yeah, it does hit you hard when that kind of thing happens.
Did it tend to be everything from pilot error, or was it malfunction, or was it weather?
I mean, technically, you can never blame the weather because it's your choice to go flying in the weather. But as with most crashes, they were all each one had its sort of how do you say it? It's like a combination of things. Some mistakes were made. I know the first one, the aircraft was heavily overloaded, so it didn't have the climb performance that it probably should have had. And so, yeah, they kind of ended up hitting the terrain. And yeah, you could blame many things, but ultimately there's never one thing with a plane crash, especially out there. I mean, the most
Yeah,
common one was obviously aircraft going into terrain, generally because the weather was poor, clouds covering mountains. That's something you shouldn't do, but it happens sometimes for whatever reason.
terrifying. Yeah, and I guess as I said, it's a dangerous game that you were playing, and on this show, I always ask guests to come on and share and relive a particular story, that stands out in their career. And I think you've got a bit of a corker that sort of resonates in your book. Can you sort of start from the beginning of that one and walk us through it?
Yeah, so this is definitely one where I genuinely thought this was going to be it. And it started, how many years was I flying? I guess it must have been about 4 or 5 years into my career at that point. So I had a pretty reasonable level of experience at this stage. And I was just doing a typical run for us, which was flying some fuel runs out to an airstrip called Seanak, which is about a 45-minute flight away from where I was based in Tomika, which is in the southern flatlands of Papua. And so this flight would be out into the mountains, drop off these fuel drums, take the empty ones back, and come back. It was mid-afternoon. So generally at that point in Papua, you don't tend to go to the really tiny airstrips because the wind starts to pick up and it just gets a lot of cloud everywhere because, you get this kind of lifting off the mountains. And so all went normal, took the fuel drums off there. And as I say, it was mid-afternoon, I think it was just after lunch. Dropped them off, fine, no problem at all. Put the empty ones back on, took off, and climbed up to 15,000 feet, which is quite high for us usually. It was on oxygen because basically, as I mentioned, there's a lot of clouds building at this point. So
And how long's the flight roughly?
about 45 minutes.
Okay, so
So and about 20 minutes or so of that's going to be over the mountains, and then you're kind of clear of them, and then you're out to the flatlands. But so we climbed up to about 15,000, was on the oxygen in the clouds because it's just safest to kind of follow these GPS tracks basically, which keeps you away from all the terrain. And I just started to feel a bit nauseous, and I just thought, not feeling ideal. You get that kind of malice sometimes. You're just sort of a bit tired, perhaps, or whatever. And then all of a sudden, I just get hit with this wave of nausea and just vomit. Like, just immediately had to grab the oxygen mask off my face and just vomit just straight into my lap. I couldn't even like hold it. It was just so instantaneous. And then once I kind of picked myself up from that, then everything was spinning. The world was just spinning around, and I just felt this waves of nausea and just like sweat just pouring off me.
Oh my
I
God.
was like, oh my God, and then just threw up again, and this is in an aircraft that doesn't have an autopilot, is fairly, it's not an unstable aircraft, but it's not stable either. If you let go of the controls, it'll start banking and things. You have to
Yeah.
fly it the whole time basically. And
And you're by
this
yourself.
I'm by myself just with a bunch of fuel drums in the back, and I couldn't work out what the hell was going on. What's causing all of this? And meanwhile, I'm inside a cloud, so I'm literally relying on the aircraft instrumentation to kind of guide me.
Oh, so you didn't have a
And
point of reference. So that's really
so no
horrible for
point of reference on
vertigo.
that. It doesn't help. It doesn't
Yeah.
help. And obviously you had these fuel drums in the back, which these things kind of pop and bang with the air pressure changes. They do give off a few fumes as well because they don't have, if they're not full, you get a lot of fumes coming out of them. So I thought, crikey, I'm being poisoned by these things. I thought maybe it's these fuel drums that are just, the fumes are overcoming me. They didn't smell any worse than usual.
Yeah.
Anyway, I kind of figured out all I could really do to stop the spinning was to kind of like rest my head like this. And so I was just sort of resting it on my side, just staring at what's called the artificial horizon, which basically tells you if the wings are level. And I'm just looking at that because the second I moved, the nausea, it would just spin. Everything would just start spinning. If I move my head in the tiniest sense, or if the aircraft gets pushed in the clouds, then that just set it off, and then
Spin.
I'd start vomiting again.
Oh my God.
And it was just harrowing. And totally aware that it was just beneath me because the mountain ridge at that point I think was at 13,000 feet. So a couple of thousand foot below me is just mountains.
Yeah.
So I can't come down. And then the thought crosses my mind, oh, what if this oxygen I'm breathing? Maybe this is the problem because we had rumors that perhaps the oxygen they were getting wasn't medical grade. It might have been from like a welding shop or something. All these kind of crazy thoughts go through your head at this point, and so I'm like, I
Yeah.
need to get off the oxygen. So then I
Yeah.
think, right, let's just start going down. I need to get down. So, and this is something you should never do as a pilot, is you have what's called a terrain awareness system on board, which kind of tells you where terrain is beneath you, and the map starts going yellow and then red if you get too close. Yellow if you're within 1,000 foot, and red if you are basically going to hit it. Um, and so I would kind of go down until it started going yellow and just warning you. You'd get this caution, terrain. At that point, you're supposed to kind of back it off. And as I say, it's not a clever way to fly an aircraft, but I was running out of options because things were spinning and I was vomiting. And,
Oh my God.
each time this nausea would hit, I would just get more tired. I could feel the blinks just like getting longer and longer between each one. And my plan was basically to track south to the flatlands, just get over the final ridges, and just get the heck off this oxygen so I can hopefully breathe some normal air. Um, and so, yeah, as I say, like I'm just teasing it towards the terrain, trying to get clear of it, trying not to hit it. But also, I'm relying on a database that may or may not be accurate.
Oh,
I've
jeez.
seen it
Yeah.
many times as a pilot, like that it would show you terrain where there wasn't any, but more harrowing, there'd be terrain where it wasn't thinking there was.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a gamble at best. Anyway, I managed to kind of basically get clear of the terrain and keep going down and get below 10,000 feet where I could come off this oxygen, um, and start making tracks towards Tamika, basically.
And you
And
didn't call like a mayday or anything like that, or you didn't jump on the radio? Is that part of protocol?
I couldn't even talk. Like I was
Oh,
just so
really?
weak. I was literally, all my powers were just trying to keep the aircraft flying and trying to keep it straight and level.
Yeah.
Because if I let go, it's just going to start spinning out, and then that's it. And I remember getting clear of the clouds and the terrain, and so I could see the jungle, 10,000 foot below. And I just on the GPS kind of went direct to Tamika and just followed this pink line. We call it the magenta line, tells you the track to kind of just follow that. And the aircraft, the GPS tracked at Susi Air. So I had a tracking system which I pushed the button, which called a quick position button, and that basically pings the kind of pings their kind of monitoring house that something's up with this aircraft, and it kind of pings a signal out. I can't remember what it was, every 5 seconds or something.
Yeah.
Not that they can do anything, but at least they can kind of
They-
see, ooh, something's wrong with this aircraft.
yeah.
And I just remember flying towards Tamika. And Tamika is a pretty big airport. It's an international airport.
Oh my
You've
God.
got 737s coming in from Australia and Jakarta and places.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking to them. I'm just barreling towards it because I just need to get this aircraft on the ground. And literally, as I say, just holding my head like this, looking at the artificial horizon, trying not to fall asleep because
Yeah.
every blink it'd be. And then if I move my head, then the nausea, the world will spin again. And then I thought, how the hell am I going to land this thing? Like
Yeah.
I can't even like move my head, and I need to look outside to land the aircraft. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to. Genuinely, every blink I just thought, that'll be the last one, and the
Yeah.
aircraft's just going to disappear into the jungle. And then they're all going to wonder, why on earth this aircraft crashed? Like there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with it. Like anyway, I remember just setting it up on Tamika's airport, hoping no other airplanes were coming in. Because as I said, I wasn't talking on the radio. I couldn't even manage to like push the button to say anything. Somehow, kind of lined it up on the runway and kind of just looked at the instruments, and then the last minute looked up and it was all there. Got it onto the runway. Um, Actually, I think it was an okay landing. And then tried to come off the runway onto the taxiway, but the rudders on the Porter are very heavy. You use the rudders to steer it on the ground. And I remember pushing the right one pretty hard to just get it off the runway. Couldn't really hold it, and then just pulled the cut-off lever for the engine just to kill the power. And that's the last thing I remember. And then I kind of came to with like I could feel hands underneath me, like picking me up, and kind of in the back of a car. And then I was still trying to vomit as well. Like I was just dry retching now, so there was nothing.
Yeah.
Because I was being moved, and it just caused this nausea again. And then I felt like I was in this car for hours. I don't know how long it was. I don't think it was that far, but anyway, got up to a hospital and just sort of started to become coherent once I was on this kind of trolley in the hospital. Like, they put like IV lines in and that kind of
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
And then the vomiting just sort of stopped. And then all of a sudden I just became really aware. I was like, oh, I actually feel fine. What the heck was all this about? It was just the weirdest thing.
Really? It was that
Yeah,
fast?
like literally, like I don't know if it was when they put the line in or whether I just everything in all the toxins, whatever was inside, just were gone, or, were done. But I was suddenly
Wow.
completely like, what the heck was all
So
this about?
so that was like
And
from
then
the
I was
time
like,
you started feeling really unwell to this sort of through the whole incident and then to the time you started feeling a bit better. How long was that? Like a
yeah,
few hours?
I'm guessing like 3 hours or so, something like that.
That's
So
so strange.
yeah, it was the oddest thing. And the doctors were like running blood tests and trying to see what's wrong. And there's like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, there's no
They
toxins.
could
There's
find
nothing
anything.
weird. And I was like, and like, what did you have for lunch? And I was like, oh, like I had a tuna mayonnaise sandwich, and they're like, I mean, it could be like some mega acute food poisoning. It's not unheard of for that to happen. I
Mm.
thought, I mean, I guess. I mean, I obviously went to Dr. Google later, and it turns out that it is actually a thing. You can actually get acute food poisoning, and I think there was an EasyJet pilot who had something similar.
Oh wow.
But obviously, on a big airline, there's two of you,
Yeah.
which kind of helps.
And an autopilot and a toilet.
Yeah, all of that. But it's the mayonnaise that had been used. Everybody was like trying to find out where they got the sandwich from, and it was one of the maids with the Susie houses there. She'd made the sandwich for me, and it was a big jar of mayonnaise, and it was just the last kind of dregs of it. And you'll know from living in Indo, it's pretty hot, and mayonnaise is probably best kept in a fridge, and I don't think it was kept in a fridge, and so it might have been mayonnaise.
I'd be in
That's
that. Oh
the
my
best guess,
god.
but
It's
I
just
never
basically
trusted it
yeah.
after that. I
Yeah.
didn't eat mayonnaise for the next 2 years.
That is extra. I mean, I cannot even imagine. It must. Okay, so I guess the thing is, if you're barely conscious, and how much are you riding on like your instinct and your training to sort of get you through? Because landing a plane, I guess any pilot will tell you that the most dangerous part, the hardest part, is taking off and landing.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
the landing was the point when you were almost the weakest. And
Yeah, yeah.
you,
As I said, like I wasn't convinced I was going to be able to land the aircraft. I wasn't sure if I was lined up on the runway properly. I was just using all my training and instrument kind of flying ability to just line the thing up by eye without moving my head, and then hoping to God I had it just right as I kind of poked my head up. Thankfully, the runway was right there in front of me and in a straight line. I was like, oh. And then all I had to do was just, chop the power, and it's one of these things you do all the time. And but yeah, as I say, it was trying to steer the thing on the ground. It's very heavy with the rudders. I had no energy. It was just unbelievable.
what happened after that? They run some blood tests. You were feeling fine, and you were discharged same day, kind of thing.
Yeah, so yeah, as I said, they run these tests. We talked about stuff, and yeah, they said honestly, there is nothing wrong with you. You're fine, and they just released me the same day. So I remember going back home, and of course, my phone was blowing up with messages because obviously, Susi Air, the Susi Air rumor mill, as we call it, it might be 17,000 islands, but everybody knows what's going on all of them within a few seconds if it's something dramatic.
Yeah.
And so I had lots of missed calls. And anyway, the chief pilot called me, and I was actually due on vacation like 3 days later, and he was like, "Oh, just go on early, And I said, "Absolutely not. I want to go flying. I want to fly tomorrow." Because the
Really?
last thing I want to do is to go away on vacation for 2 weeks and have that as my last flight.
Yep.
He was
Fair
actually
enough.
very much like, "No, like you're going on holiday." I was like, "No, I want to fly." Um, and I did. I went. So I think I had one day off,
Yeah.
just to be
Yeah.
sure.
Rehydrate or
But
whatever.
honestly, I
Yeah.
was absolutely fine. And then I went and flew the schedule the next 2 days. Um, and
And
yeah, I got back on
just
that
put it
horse
behind you.
because I had to put it behind me. Yeah, it's as I say, like I guess it can go two ways with that sort of thing. You either kind of get terrified and never do it again, or
Yeah.
you jump back on the horse and you get back on with it, especially if it's something you love doing.
It's really interesting. I had a previous episode with a pilot who had she was in a similar situation, small aircraft, but crashed in the middle of the Pacific,
Oh
and
wow.
so she had 9 hours in the middle of nowhere and hoping to get rescued on a boat and all that kind of stuff. But I would expect her to find that whole experience harrowing and traumatic, and she's like, no, no. I got back to base, a couple of days later, got back in a plane and did it all again and got back on the horse. And
Yeah,
is it a pilot thing? Like it's so, the job itself is so exhilarating that it's going to take a lot for something to sort of knock you off and keep you down.
I think so. I mean, I don't know if it's just a pilot thing, but I think if it's something you're passionate about and it's something you enjoy doing, like even if it is dangerous,
Mm.
um, then if there's that old mantra, and if it doesn't kill you, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Makes it stronger, yeah.
Um, I don't know about that, but it definitely, if it doesn't kill you and you still like doing it, then carry on doing it, basically. And
Yeah, absolutely.
as I say, I didn't eat mayonnaise for the rest of my time in Indonesia.
Yeah, you didn't get back on the mayonnaise horse. That was the only
I
problem.
didn't get back on that one. That was, and actually, what's quite funny because at as I say, at Suzy we had different bases, and we were quite kept. So we had a little house there with normally some staff, like a maid, and kind of guys who take you to and from the airport, and so. But the word got round about the mayonnaise, and so I never had to say no mayonnaise in my sandwiches. I just never got mayonnaise.
It's just a given. Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, given all that, like, I mean, what do you, in all your experiences in Indonesia flying, bush piloting, I mean, what does it take to be a bush pilot, would you say? And people that might be listening to be like, that kind of sounds like something I'd love to do. But realistically, what does it take to be a successful bush pilot?
Yeah, so there's a few things, I suppose. I remember the best bit of advice I got was actually the guy who trained me on the Porter, a guy called Sven Imsan, Swiss actually. And he said to me, he said, like, this is like your kind of box of experience, right? And said initially just fly within the box, just stay within that and just build that up. But every so often, push it, go to the edge of that box, maybe nudge it a bit, and then the box gets a bit bigger, and then you just keep doing this, and then you keep doing this, and then the experience box gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it just allows you all this to kind of develop experience and just sort of get to the edge of that safely. Because if you stay within the box and you just stay here, one day you'll get something that's going to be over here somewhere, and if your box is still here, you're basically.
Yeah.
Whereas if that box has been expanded and it happens and it's just on the edge, you've probably got enough experience to cover yourself on that and save that situation. And that stuck with me. And
Interesting.
not just with flying, just with life in general, really.
Yeah. It's
And
good life
it's just
advice.
sort of it's kind of seen me good, to be honest.
And what does that look like when you're piloting? Let's say you're sort of mid-career and you're like, this this approach looks pretty sketchy. It's kind of a bit cloudy. I know the runway's short. It might be a little bit muddy. I might not typically do this, but I'm going to give this a try. I mean, what can I give us a scenario of what pushing the boundary might look like?
Yeah, I mean that's very much it. Really, would be sort of going to perhaps an airstrip that you hadn't been to before, that was maybe a little bit shorter than what you were used to, or a little bit steeper. Um, I mean, what I used to do actually would be to take an airstrip that was comfortably within my zone, but then just test it a bit by perhaps coming in at a much more acute angle to kind of to actually sort of practice. If there was a load of cloud on the approach, how could I get into an airstrip where I had to make a very tight turn onto the final approach right at the last minute, sort of thing. And just sort of practicing that sort of stuff where you had a more margin for error, such that if you got presented with that down the line for real, then at least you've kind of got a better baseline to go off, as opposed to just suddenly going, oh, what am I going to do now? And I guess the art of bush flying is very much sort of knowing when you need to push it a bit and knowing when you've got to back it off, because
Mm.
there are some times where you look up that valley and it's like a little bit cloudy and you go, what is that doing? Can I get in and out of there safely, or is that just going to be too dicey? um, but equally sometimes you have to make that call, and because if you just kept coming back to base and not making that call, you'd never get the job done. So
Mhm.
it's that kind of that balancing act, which that comes with experience.
I suppose when you do get the tricky ones, like all of your, you're absolutely zoned in and focused because you've got to be like, and some of the runways that you did have that were tricky. There, I mean, I imagine they're like on the sides of mountains and stuff, like that kind of thing, like literally that
Yeah,
level.
I mean, definitely as I gained more experience with the flying, I was then invited to basically open up an airstrip, as you'd say. So it'd be the very first aircraft to land on an
Oh
airstrip,
wow,
say. So this would be, a local village has spent many years hand constructing these runways, by chopping trees down, moving
oh
rocks out
my
of the way,
god,
all by
wow,
hand with hand tools. And then
yeah,
the word would come out via the kind of local villages,
network,
basically
yeah,
the network, and it would come back to where the aircraft would be based. Like, there's a new runway, and we'd like you to come and have a look at it.
wow,
And so with that, that's when you kind of sometimes you get some information, you get some coordinates, where it was, that sort of thing, maybe how long it was, maybe a helicopter had gone before just to go and have a look.
yeah,
But sometimes you're going in blind, you take someone along with you who would just be like, okay, it's sort of near this airstrip, but carry on up the valley and it's on the left around the corner, sort of thing. And so you then have to go and check it out. And so had a kind of system which you go overhead and you'd have a look at it, and then you kind of down a bit lower just to have a look at the surface, and then try and come up the other side of the runway if you could, just to sort of see what it would look like on the takeoff, and ultimately you'd then commit to that landing. And so yeah, you'd kind of focus a bit more then, even if it didn't look that hard, because no one has been there yet. So it's definitely
oh
not
my
100%
god,
safe. Not that any
what a
of them were,
feeling.
but it would be, yeah, you get a bit more adrenaline going for those kind of ones. And then when you land, it was just the marvel of it, because obviously you were now connecting this village to the outside world, basically. And so there'd be huge celebration. Everyone would be dancing and chanting, and
Really?
you'd often get presented with gifts and things. And it was, yeah, it was just wonderful. That was kind of a real privilege of the job in the end.
That's amazing. So like they would be giving you like local gifts, things they made, or food, or
Yeah, I mean, you get sort of necklaces and bracelets, and but normally they give you a cockerel. That was the that would be a tradition. So
that's
I had quite a few in the end. And I remember the very first one we got. I took him back to the house, and we called him Boris.
yeah.
And he woke me up at 4 o'clock in the morning. So Boris didn't last that night.
At least you got fresh chicken the next day, I guess,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
For your
He wasn't the
lunch.
best, but yeah.
Oh, poor Boris. Oh man. But that I think that's honestly incredible that like a village like that kind of gets an idea that we want to be connected to the outside world, and to do
Mm.
that, no one's going to build our runway for us. We've got to do it ourselves. And they spend, as you said, like a year or whatever
Oh,
preparing this
years,
stuff.
years. I mean, I
Years.
think one of them I remember I think they were still 20 years into building it. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
And yeah, I can imagine from their perspective, the first time a plane lands it's like a complete game changing moment for them. They can trade, they can get stuff in, they can get stuff out, and
That's it. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
oh
because
my
obviously they
god,
would, they'd walk between the villages. There'd be a lot of little kind of jungle paths and things, so
yeah,
they'd kind of see the benefits from another village. Potentially this one has electricity, and they've got solar panels and everything else, and so like, oh, it'd be nice to have that in our village, and so, and that's kind of how it would go.
Amazing. That's just, yeah, it's sort of human ingenuity, that sort of
Yeah,
desire to be connected to other people and to the rest of civilization. And I guess, for better or for worse, is there's,
very much so. Yeah,
yeah,
very much so. I do remember even during my short time out there, it was the development was enormous. And as you say, for better or worse, a big sort of downside, I would say, would be the rubbish, the trash, because a lot of these guys, obviously they've lived just on the land basically, so they eat on banana leaves and everything, and so now they get a packet of noodles and they do what they do with the banana leaves. They just toss it in the jungle because the jungle
that's what
absorbs.
they,
But unfortunately, a plastic water bottle and a pack of noodles, it stays there. And so, yeah, there was always a bit of a trash epidemic in a lot of places, sadly.
yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask about your anxiety problems.
Hmm.
So we started the sort of story with that, and when you got to the end of your career with Susie and so decided to leave, anxiety problems completely disappeared.
Yeah, so yeah, I should have mentioned that earlier. They disappeared pretty quickly, actually, whilst I was still a co-pilot,
Yeah.
and I couldn't pinpoint a date or exact moment when it had gone, but I just sort of became aware at
Mm.
some stage during those first few months that I was sleeping soundly, waking up normal time, and none of this churning feeling anymore. And it didn't make any sense at the time. I kind of just went with it. I thought, oh, this is amazing. I'm cured. Like, thank God. This like harrowing, like, this has been like a decade of my life of just feeling crap. Um, I just completely gone. But reflecting back now, I kind of realized, and I kind of touched on it earlier, that when I've kind of done something, I feel I'm done with it.
Hmm.
And so I then want to do something else. And, as someone in their kind of mid 20s, I didn't have a lot of life experience. And so I think my mind would have been at that stage, this is me forever, in this flat in Bristol, working this Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. This is it. The rest of your life is this. And so by, jacking all of that in, moving to the other side of the world to a job I'd never been to, literally giving myself the most extreme kick that I could have imagined, kind of taught me deep down, like psychologically, that nothing's forever, basically. And so, if you really want to make a change to life, you can make a change. And so, I've kind of gone with that ever since, really. And I suspect that's why I did 7 years in Asia, because it was a similar period. 5 or 6 years in, I was like, kind of getting done with this. Like, I wouldn't mind trying something else now.
Yeah.
Um, and so I did, and people thought I was crazy. They're like, why are you leaving this like paradise? This amazing flying. And,
Yeah.
and all these airline people were texting me going, God, you're mad. Why the hell would you want to leave all this? And because I was done with it. I had an incredible time. I'd done more than I could possibly have ever achieved. But I needed to make the change, because that's just who I am, it turns out.
Fascinating. I think that's really interesting, and actually quite an interesting message as well. The fact that a lot of people out there, going into careers, they might find the office job, the good salary, the stability, that is their sort of comfort and safety zone,
Mm.
and understandably, absolutely. But what's happened, what it turns out for you, and maybe some other people out there, is that they needed the opposite: the chaos, the rough and ready, the slight edge of danger, the unpredictability to it, the risk. That is your comfort and safety zone,
Yeah.
ironically.
I mean, I don't even know if it needs to be that, because I mean, I've been obviously back in the UK now for 8 years, and I'm getting itchy feet for sure.
Again.
Again. um,
So,
but and I'm having a great time still, and I'm still enjoying life, but I still want another challenge. Haven't quite settled on what that's going to be yet, but I'm making inquiries, shall we say?
what are you able to clue us into anything that you're interested potentially in
Honestly,
looking at?
like anything really.
Yeah,
Just something else in flying, I suspect. Maybe the airlines might be the thing now,
interesting.
because I've done all these other kind of things in flying. I've
Yeah,
been flying this kind of corporate jet basically around Europe, which is amazing, and it's an amazing job. And so, maybe a different aircraft doing that sort of thing, or as I say, maybe the airlines. As I say, I haven't really decided, but maybe something else entirely. I mean, my retirement plan is to buy a sailing yacht and go sailing around the world. So that's, I need some more danger. I need to go over the Atlantic and get terrified by some massive waves because that just sounds awesome.
Yeah, apparently you just need to be in that discomfort zone to feel comfortable. Yeah,
I
so
reckon. Yeah.
fantastic.
I don't do well in like the rut, the normal rut. It doesn't
Yeah,
work for me.
yeah, doesn't work clearly. Brilliant, Matt. Absolutely fantastic chatting here, all your stories, and fascinating conversation. And I always at the end of the show just love offering people a chance of telling people what they've been up to, where they can find you, and what you've kind of got out in the world.
So yeah, you find me online. I have a lot of social media things. At IndoPilot is my kind of handle. You can get me on Instagram, Twitter, and what's the other one? Facebook. That's it.
Facebook, yeah.
I'm such a professional with all the social media things. But on top of that, I also have this book which I've written called "Flying from Shangri-La," which basically follows my whole journey from being in IT through to being a bush pilot out in Indonesia and kind of all the things I've learned along the way and all the kind of adventures through it. It's an aviation book, but it's not written for pilots. It's written for anybody who enjoys adventure and just sort of life-changing kind of moments, I suppose. So yeah, go check it out.
And I've been reading through it, and it is, as you said, it's super accessible. It's not too technical, and it's written sort of, very much in like sort of story, centric kind of way, and very, very easy to read, and lots of super fun anecdotes and a real inside look. I mean, especially for anyone that's interested in bush piloting, especially in Indonesia. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better sort of behind the scenes look into that world. So I think, yeah, absolutely check it out.
Yeah, there's probably some stories in there that probably didn't need to be shared, but people tell me they're funny anyway, so we'll leave it on that.
Yeah, I was reading them and I was like, wow, Matt really went for it. Yeah, you sort of open book there. It was,
Yeah, literally.
yeah, literally, exactly. Fantastic. Brilliant. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time today to chat. And yeah,
Hi,
so,
most welcome, Chris. Thank you.
And that is a wrap on this week's episode. A huge thanks again to Matt for sharing his stories with us. And of course, thanks to you all for listening and watching as well. If you'd like to learn more about Matt's work or his book, Flying from Shangri-La, you'll find all the links in the show notes or over on our website, noordinarymonday.com. And as always, you can find extra clips and visuals from this episode all across our socials. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, and over on the No Ordinary Monday podcast community page on Facebook, where you can join the conversation, ask questions for guests, and share your thoughts about the show. Next week on No Ordinary Monday, I am joined by death doula and educator Danny Petkovic. Danny's work centers on helping people face death with more honesty, less fear, and far more humanity. We explore how denying death actually creates more suffering, and how learning to talk about it openly can make life richer, more connected, and more meaningful. So make sure you're following or subscribed to the show so you don't miss out on this or any of our future episodes. Now, if you enjoyed today's show, there are 4 simple ways that you can show us some support. You can click 5 stars on this episode or the show on whatever platform you're listening on. Number 2, you can leave us a short review. Number 3, share the episode with a family, friend, or colleague. And finally, number 4, you can buy us a coffee or a beer at buymeacoffee.com/noordinarymonday. Any one of these things can help us keep the lights on, stay independent, avoid adverts, and keep bringing you amazing guests and stories week after week. And that's it for this episode. This show is independently produced, hosted, and edited by me, Chris Barron. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you next Monday.